Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the last video. This channel is all about learning in a fun and easy way. Every video we make includes images to help you understand and imagine better. Today's we will go through a story of Louis Pasteur associated with French beer industry and discovery of rabies vaccine. Before we start, do you know what were the contribution of Louis Pasteur? Disproved spontaneous generation with swan neck flask experiments. Developed the germ theory of fermentation and disease. Created vaccines for rabies, anthrax, and chicken cholera. Introduced pasteurization. Let us begin with our first story, Louis Pasteur and French beer industry, a short story. In the 1860s, the French beer industry was in trouble. Brewers were facing huge losses because their beer would spoil unpredictably, sometimes turning sour or undrinkable. They didn't know why, and they needed help. Louis Pasteur, already known for his work on wine fermentation, was asked to investigate. At the time, people still believed that fermentation was a purely chemical process. But Pasteur had a different idea. Microorganisms, tiny, living creatures, were involved. Using a microscope, Pasteur studied beer samples and found that different types of microbes were responsible for good and bad fermentation. He proved that when the beer spoiled, it was because unwanted bacteria or wild yeasts had contaminated the brew. His solution was revolutionary. He showed that by heating the beer to a certain temperature, these harmful microbes could be killed, without ruining the flavor. This process became known as pasteurization, and it saved not just beer, but also milk, wine, and other food products from spoilage. Thanks to Pasteur, the brewing industry adopted cleaner methods, controlled fermentations, and microbiological monitoring, transforming beer into a safer and more consistent product. Let us begin with our second story about Louis Pasteur and the rabies vaccine, a short story. In the late 19th century, rabies was one of the most feared diseases in the world. A bite from a rabid dog was seen as a death sentence. Once symptoms set in, paralysis, confusion, hydrophobia, there was no cure. Families watched helplessly as loved ones deteriorated. Doctors had no answer, but in a laboratory in France, a determined scientist was working on a bold idea that could change everything. Louis Pasteur, a chemist turned biologist, had already made his name by showing that germs cause disease. He had developed vaccines for anthrax and chicken cholera. Now, he had set his sights on something even more dangerous, rabies, a mysterious, terrifying virus that attacked the brain. Together with his colleague Émile Roux, Pasteur began experimenting. They took infected spinal cords from rabbits and discovered that drying them weakened the virus. This process, called attenuation, allowed them to create a vaccine that could teach the body to fight the disease without causing it. They tested the vaccine on dogs. It worked. The dogs lived. But Pasteur hesitated. Using it on a human would be dangerous, possibly fatal. And he wasn't a medical doctor. Then, in July 1885, fate knocked on Pasteur's door. A desperate mother arrived with her 9-year-old son, Joseph Meister. The boy had been mauled by a rabid dog, bitten 14 times. Everyone knew what was coming, certain death. The local doctors had no hope. The mother had heard of Pasteur's experiments and begged for his help. Pasteur was torn. He had never tested the vaccine on a human. If he failed, the boy might die, and Pasteur could be blamed. But if he did nothing, Joseph would surely die anyway. With permission from the boy's doctors and mother, Pasteur made a courageous decision. Over 11 days, Pasteur gave Joseph a series of 13 injections, starting with the most weakened virus and gradually using stronger samples. Every shot was a gamble. But Joseph never showed symptoms. He survived. It was a medical miracle. The world took notice. Pasteur had not just created a vaccine, he had shown that even after exposure, the body could be trained to fight off a deadly disease. Joseph Meister became the first person in history to be saved from rabies. Pasteur went on to open the Pasteur Institute in 1888, a center for research and innovation. His methods shaped modern immunology, and his courage saved millions of lives in the years to come. For more exciting topics, you can subscribe this channel. Thank you for watching, hope you like it.